Thank you for tuning in. I wanted to share today about an experience that I had 5 years ago, almost to the day. It happened on March 17th, 2018. And it's something that I didn't know at the time, but it was a huge sort of insight into what was going to be happening in my life over the next few years. So the past 5 years have been greatly impacted by the events that took place around this time. And what happened was I had a premonition dream about a shared death experience that I was about to have. And to give a little context, I have had experiences in the past throughout my life, numerous experiences, where I saw something that was going to happen in the future. I think we all have psychic gifts and abilities. It's actually very natural if we're tuned into ourself and really our own, our soul and nature and the universe and the multiverse. This is how really it's a natural phenomenon, is what I'm trying to say. I don't think that psychic abilities or, sensing things that are invisible or, perceiving things that not everyone can see. I don't think that this is even so much like a special thing that only happens to some people. I think that everybody has some sense of, underlying things that maybe aren't being said or spoken sometimes. I think we all have intuition. We all have abilities to perceive many things that, that we may not fully understand. And this was something that when I was a teenager became very active in my awareness. I think I was about 17, maybe 18. I started to have premonition dreams every night. And this was something at the time I didn't understand at all. And it was so vivid and so real. I started having dreams that would be the exact same thing that would happen the next day. And it would be a simple thing, like sitting around in a specific setting or layout with a group of friends or new people that I had met, conversations that we were having, and how we were sitting and what we were wearing. It was the exact same thing, except it would be flipped horizontally. So it was almost like watching it in reverse. And this is something that for years really puzzled me. And I often wondered, why was it the exact same thing every day, day in and day out, to the point where this was undeniable for me that this was really happening? And why was this flip thing happening? And it didn't really become more clear to me until I would say in about 2021, I was doing a lot of research into near-death experiences and shared death experiences. And I was also taking online courses through various outlets like the Theosophical Society. And there are a couple, people that are really well known in the Theosophical Society. C.W. Ledbetter, Madame Blavatsky, I think is her name. And there's a teacher currently, Pablo Sender, who does a lot of courses based off of C.W. Ledbetter's books and writings. One of them has to do, several of them have to do with dreams, and I forget the exact title of the dream, but I was doing a course led by Pablo Sender, and he was describing the different levels that we access during dreams. And there are many different planes. I have studied consciousness for many years, and so I had a perspective from the Vedic background. I studied Vedic science and technologies of consciousness through Maharishi University, and decades, like literally decades, I have been studying this through that. But even as a child and a teenager, I was always reading different books by different, on different topics of metaphysics and spirituality and New Age topics and indigenous studies, natural medicine, herbal medicine. I grew up in a very spiritual household, and my mom's side of the family is Native American and very New Age and open to all of these things. So this was very much a part of my upbringing, and I devoured this knowledge. I always have been really, really fascinated by it and into it. Even in elementary school, I wrote, papers on topics like this. So it's been a lifelong exploration that I have had in this area. Now, I don't even know anything about it. I feel sometimes it's like it's so big and so vast, and because so much of what happens in nature is invisible and not understood by scientific means, and I don't think going to be totally understood anytime soon, because I feel like we only know like about this much of reality. And then there's about this much that we know we don't know, but then there's this much that we don't know, that we don't even know about. And this leaves a lot of unexplained, uncharted, misunderstood, and areas where we have a lot of understanding to gain. So the phenomenon of this premonition dream and seeing these images that were flipped, it started to make sense to me in this course that I took with Pablo Sender, where he was describing the different planes of reality existence that we access during dreams. One of them is the astral plane, and there are lower levels of the astral plane, higher levels of the astral plane, and kind of medium. And then there's, I think, the Buddhic and Manas, and I'm not sure which is first. It's the mind, the mental plane, kind of more refined, subtle realms of intellect, and then Atma, the soul, pure soul level, higher spiritual dimensional plane that is also something, in meditation and what I've studied through my experiences with transcendental meditation and Vedic science. It's that field of Atma that we access when we transcend. And so I was a little bit familiar with these, but in Pablo's description of what happens when we're dreaming, we often go to the astral plane, and also oftentimes when people pass away, they're in the astral plane, some level of it. And there are lower levels, which some people describe as hell, and like lower levels of hell that are described as Avicii. And so there's these different levels. And some of the traits of the astral plane are that things appear opposite. So if it's like 1, 2, 3, in the dream it would be 3, 2, 1. So this is the first time when I started to understand that that's probably where these premonition dreams that I was having at the time, when I was like 17, that they were happening in the astral plane. And I have never been really fully, I've never really explored like astral projection or out-of-body experiences. That was never really my jam or interest. But what started to happen more was that in addition to the premonition dreams that I'd have about my own life, I started to have dreams about disastrous things that would happen, that I would then read about in the news, or even it started to happen in my waking life. And I was at the time kind of living really as a monk, like in a spiritual center where I was meditating many hours a day for a couple years in 2000, 2001. And it was in this setting where when 9/11 happened the day before, I had a vision. I stood up and I was walking through my room, and all of a sudden this light projected out of my heart like a movie projector and showed the entire imagery of what was going to happen on 9/11, the plane crashing into the building. There were a couple planes and people jumping out of the buildings, and the planes, burning and falling down. And this was absolutely terrifying to me. So having these experiences when I was younger, sometimes it was like, okay, well, that's cool. Other times it terrified me. And I had a lot of anxiety around this because I couldn't do anything about it. I felt like, why am I seeing and perceiving these things? Am I responsible for them? When you're young, you just don't know. And it caused me a lot of fear. And other experiences that I had where I would see and hear people who had passed away, I also was scared because I didn't know how to sort of manage it and what was going on and how to communicate clearly and how to have boundaries. And I'm really sensitive, like a lot of empaths. I don't know how to have boundaries, and I've been learning how to have boundaries and how to just exist safely in the world for the last few years. It's been something that I have been really diligently, gaining a better understanding of and applying in my own life. And it's not something that I even really thought about so much when I was younger. I had a lot of childhood trauma, and I just kind of had to shut a lot of things down. And I've experienced a lot of things where my own personal boundaries have been greatly abused and not respected. So this is a challenge that I think a lot of us struggle with. And, certainly I've experienced it as well. And we're all human, and, everybody's trying to do the best that they can. But this, just living in the world as a normal person who is not highly sensitive, I don't know what a normal person is. I don't know if there are like quote unquote normies, but having been in years of recovery and from addiction and substance and behavioral patterns, I'm so used to seeing other people who really struggle and who understand that, life is not easy. And I really shut this side of myself down for many years. And yet, oftentimes I find that when these sort of strong intuitive things happen, they're very surprising. And I had an experience March 17th, 2018, that was very surprising to me. I woke up and I'd had a dream that felt like a premonition dream. And I had had some throughout the years, but not as strong as I did when I was a teenager. And this is like in the mid 90s, like 1995, when this really was happening to me on a regular basis. So in 2018, it had been years since I'd had an experience quite like this. But I wrote about it when I woke up that morning because it was so strong. And I posted it to Instagram, one of my Instagram accounts. And I'm going to describe what the dream was. Again, this was the morning of March 17th, 2018. The night before, I had just scheduled my first meeting with a young man. I only knew his name was Tim. I didn't know anything more, but we'd scheduled a meeting. And so I had been feeling very drawn to work with this person, and I didn't understand why. But when my cousin, who was our office assistant at the time, told me that there was a young man who was asking for a teacher to come to his house, I had this big opening in my heart. And this has only happened a couple times, like that experience before 9/11, and a couple other times when I was meeting somebody really significant that would radically change my life. One of those other times happened to be when a friend of mine was telling me about David Lynch, because I had been wanting to organize events that would help other students and college students understand their consciousness better and to be able to raise and elevate their own consciousness, because meditation had been a huge part of my really saving my life and my path of recovery and growth and evolution. And I wanted more people to have the benefits of it because it had been such a beautiful addition to my own life, and it had transformed everything in my life. So somebody was telling me about David Lynch, and I didn't know who he was at the time, even though I grew up near where Twin Peaks was filmed. But as she was telling me about David, I just had this this is him, David, you have to have him speak at events. And I ended up organizing the first events where he spoke to college students, and when he decided to do the David Lynch Foundation. So I was involved very early on in the formation of the David Lynch Foundation, which has now taught hundreds of thousands of people how to meditate around the world in schools, homeless shelters, prisons, to various at-risk populations. So this is something that really was a huge thing in my life, because it enabled me also to become a meditation teacher and to teach many, many people and to work in one of the busiest transcendental meditation centers in the country at the time in Los Angeles. So when I had this push, this feeling, this expansion in my heart, you have to go be with this person, I listened to it and I said, okay, I'll go. And so I set up the meeting on March 16th to meet with him. And then the morning of March 17th, I had this dream where in the dream, I was going through an amusement park ride, and it went through this whole theme park. And the theme park itself was actually in the dream. It was a David Lynch movie, and which was kind of ironic because I kind of felt like my life was in a David Lynch movie. Even when I first went to Los Angeles, it was all just like I was going to meet and work with David, and it was very surreal because, you know, we'd be at his like house, and there were a lot of you know, amazing people around. I got to work with and meet many legends and amazing people in that time, and it was like I loved being there and working with him. And then I became a huge fan of Twin Peaks and that whole community and the art and just the creativity and connection that came out of that experience as well were very important to me in my life. And so in this dream, the fact that I was like going through this David Lynch movie on a roller coaster, like in this, not like a huge roller coaster, but just gently sort of cruising this theme park. And what happened as we were going through different dimensions, and I could see the different layers as we would go into another dimension of reality. And it was just really cool. And then this wall of like veil opened up. And I could suddenly see all the spirits through this opening in the veil. I could see, you know, many, many, many different beings that were there. And I knew that they were like the protagonists and antagonists in life. And I could see that from that point on, I was going to see how they influenced our life here in this 3D waking state. You know, that we have every day in, day out. We could just go through life and we don't always really know like what is influencing us and what is helping or supporting us through life. And one particular being, this white being of light, sort of stepped near the veil and into the opening, and we had contact. And I still remember it so vividly, as it was just like, oh, there's my friend. And it was really a beautiful thing. I made a little animation of this a couple years ago. It's very rudimentary, but I'll just show that now for a second. So that was just a brief glimpse of this opening in the veil to the other side of reality, the afterlife, the soul, the spirit world. I started to have more contact with it. And then in the dream, I was cruising along. I went along on the roller coaster still, and I was with some guy, and he was drinking a lot of whiskey because that was his favorite drink. And at the end, we were like making out, and all this stuff happened. That was just like fun and silly and kind of just a wild little ride. And I just could not have imagined that this was going to be a premonition dream. It was so strong, and yet it was so bizarre. And it didn't make any sense until about maybe 7 or 8 weeks later, when I started, maybe even less than that actually, I started to have direct communication with this young man who I had set up the meeting with. He passed away. And a few days later, I met a psychic medium who could communicate with him and who told me that he was around me and that I could talk with him. And so I did. And it was several weeks. And now it's been 5 years where I've had multiple experiences, multiple communications, and multiple experiences with him and just spirit in general. It's helped me to understand the afterlife, what happens when people die as we transition, what happens, why we even come into these human incarnations, and why we forget that the veil is there cloaking our memory, clouding and shrouding. It helps us forget where we come from, that we are soul, that we are spirit, that we choose these human incarnations, and we come in with a purpose, and we come in with a mission, more or less, and lessons that we choose to learn and to go through to help our soul grow. And this was an extremely painful, extremely difficult process to lose somebody that I cared about very much, that I had just met, but had this inner knowing as soon as we met and worked with each other for a few days, that, you know, that this was something that my soul had been preparing me for. My entire life suddenly started to make sense. I was like, oh, I'm supposed to be here with this person. And I had other premonitions while I was there, that didn't make sense. And when I was working with him in person while he was still alive, and I even had the first day after we met for an instant, I left his house, and I just was thinking, like, what's going to happen here? And this intense, heavy wave of sorrow just took over my whole body, to the point where I just thought I was going to collapse and crumble onto the sidewalk. And I mustered up the strength to get to my car, and I sat in my car for a good 20 minutes before I drove away, just kind of collecting myself and thinking, like, what was that? What is this about? Trying to understand, because it didn't, really make sense that it would be so doom and gloom. This was somebody very young and bright and clearly talented. I didn't know who he was. Like, he had a lot of success in the world, and I didn't, I wasn't aware of his work at the time. And I just prayed, because I'd been doing 12-step work. I'm not religious, but I pray a lot. I do the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I do the 3rd-step prayer. God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. This is one of my favorite prayers. It's part of the 3rd step in the 12 steps of recovery. And it, to me, really reminds me, there's so many different aspects, but it really also reminds me of Ganesh, and that ability to both remove obstacles and to maybe put obstacles in front of us if things are not meant for us, if things that we're doing are not good for our highest self and our evolution. What do they say? Rejection is God's protection. So I sat there and I prayed, and I asked, what should I do? And it was so strong that I needed to show up. I needed to show up every day with this person, work with him, give him all my love and support, and do my very best. And that's all I could do. And that's what I did. Now, when he passed away, obviously I was very devastated. That would be an understatement. I was traumatized, because then I replayed. I was just there. I was with him for a week, and I got a lot of, intense messages from people who were criticizing me for not knowing and not doing anything. And in many ways, I was way harder on myself in this situation probably than anyone else would have been or could have been, because I was there, and I could have, and I should have, and every possible scenario that I could have said. And I've talked with many people who are survivors of suicide or have lost loved ones and, family to chronic illness, and that guilt can consume you. It can kill you, and quite literally. And so this was something that I really had to process, and over the last few years have spent a tremendous amount of time reflecting on and thinking about, and also even communicating with him, because like I said, I had communication with this person even after he passed away. And so and he was telling me, like, there's nothing you could have done. There's nothing you could have done. And I do believe that. I do believe that, like, if he was really meant to be here, he would be here. And as difficult as that is for me to say, and as difficult as it has been for me to accept, I do truly believe that this was his time to exit, to depart his human body, his human incarnation. And could it have been differently? Maybe, but I don't think that it was meant to be. And there are many reasons for that, from conversations and experiences that I've had with him and listening to other people who have gone through, the experience of dying and then coming back into their bodies because they've had near-death experiences. And I just don't believe that it was meant for him to stay at this time. And yet he left such a big legacy and impression, and influence in the world, and I believe that that will continue to carry on. So this was just a little bit about a premonition that I didn't understand at the time, that has started to become more clear over the past 5 years, because I had so much time to process and also appreciate and better understand and directly perceive what it is beyond our limited, finite, tiny, limited little, like, what we think we know and understand, like what reality is. Like, this is all of existence on earth right here between my hands. This is it. You know, we can see just a sliver of it. And it's dark sometimes. Like, there's just a little glimmer of light and hope beyond there. But actually, like, it's so much more. And there's this huge, big, bright, infinite field of love and energy and intelligence. And whether you call it God, spirit, soul, the beyond, Allah, Muhammad, Christ, Ganesh, Shiva, self, all of it. Whatever you call the different tiny little, you know, fragmented but still solid representations of it that we've given a package and, you know, sold as religion or belief or faith that there is something more. It's so much more than anything that we can read about or write about. And yeah, I've had a lot of direct experience through my own meditation, and I've again spent years studying consciousness and the nature of consciousness and how it unfolds and how everything in the universe is infinitely connected and intimately connected. This connection on the level of spirit, there's nothing more intimate than that. It's so beautiful. And it's also, I don't want to say fleeting, because it's always there, but it's there regardless of who it's with, whether it's one person or 10 or 20 or thousands of people. You know, if you're like dancing in a big crowd of people, I've had this experience. The first time I really felt connected, like we were all connected, it was dancing. It was actually at a Beck concert when I was, I think, 15 or 16 in Seattle at Club DV8. And it was just so profound. It was like, okay, literally we're all one. Just this sea of people and everything on the world, everything on the planet, we're all one. And this has become more pronounced also after this shared death experience and everything that I went through. I was in so much pain and agony. And one day in maybe December or January of 2018 or 2019, I was meditating, and I was in so much pain still. I was still so much grieving this person, because now we had communication after he passed away, and there was so much love, and it just made me actually miss him even more, because I wanted him to be in the physical world and, you know, to still be with his friends and family and doing just, you know, everything that he did so well in the world. And so I just felt this devastating loss, and it had consumed me for many months, and I hadn't been sleeping for many months. And I sat down, and in my meditation, there's something that we do, and I had been teaching meditation, so I was very familiar, but I didn't always use this thing where if there's so much discomfort or pain or trauma, we can just sit and innocently put our attention on, like, what are we feeling? What's going on in our body? And it might be that there's, like, sometimes in grief, I have this, like, it's almost like a chokehold, and it's like, you know, that's like, my heart hurts, my throat hurts, everything. And it literally feels like just, I'm being, you know, choked up and can't speak or can't function, or, it could be like a headache, or just feeling a little bit anxious, or some fear, or just fatigue or anything that you're feeling in the body, you can just innocently put your attention on it without judging it or naming it, labeling it, and just noticing, oh, there's like a pain in my shoulder. And it might get more intense because now your consciousness is like really, hey, yeah, it's there. We're going to go to that thing and we're going to see what we can do to work through it. And then it'll start to settle down. And as the body starts to settle down, the mind starts to settle down and you feel a little bit lighter. And so this is what I did one day. It was like all this pain and anger. I was so angry. I can't even tell you. And some days I would just yell and scream, at this person that they were dead. And, why the fuck did you leave? Why did you do this? And this is just part of it. And I was actually working with somebody who was a death doula. And she said, especially when people die by suicide or it can be even helpful to impress on them that this is not the way out. That being here, being alive, being a human is incredibly precious, and souls get in line and they wait thousands of lifetimes to be able to have this experience. It is a golden opportunity. And so many of us chose this time to be incarnated on the planet right now when we are having a global mass shift and awakening that has never happened like anything like this in the history of humanity and even throughout the universe. This is an incredibly special time and a crucial and important time because our planet is sick and dying, and many of us, our souls, are sick and dying on this planet. So we have to now go through this process of rock bottom, awakening, shift, a paradigm shift, whatever you want to call it. Now is the time, and it is happening, and it has been happening the past few years. And we've all gone through this, real global trauma and, witnessed how quickly life can change because of a minuscule, like totally invisible to the naked eye, little virus. And you can't tell me that you now don't look at life a little bit differently than you did 3 years ago. It really caused a lot of us to think about our own death and mortality and what is precious, what is valuable, what is important, why are we here? Now, yeah, a lot of people just wanted things to go back to normal as quickly as possible and pretend that this didn't exist and, just can carry on with life. But I think a lot of us were rudely awakened to the fact that, this so-called reality and stability that we think is holding everything together of our jobs, our income, just everything, our healthcare, food sources, food resources, everything can change in an instant. And it will probably change even more in the next few years. And it is really time to shift our attention to what is important and to make changes in our own life. Having this experience that life, was taken away so quickly from somebody, and I'd experienced other losses in the 2 years prior. So this is I wasn't just processing this person's death. 2 years prior, my father and my grandmother passed away within weeks of each other. And I was also processing my childhood because I did not have a good relationship with either one of them. I was also processing the grief of my childhood and the grief of any potential relationship I could have had with them. And I had told somebody 2 days prior to this person passing away, so it was April 18th, 2020, somebody had come to my office, and it was a colleague, a supervisor of sorts, and we were having a conversation about somebody else that had just passed away who was really important in our community. And they were asking me about another person in my family who was also a coworker, because my mom also was teaching meditation, still does. She was, going through something that was a little bit challenging, and I just was like, my brother and I can't deal with any more loss or stress right now. And I said, I cannot handle any more loss or grief. This was 2 days before my friend died. I was like, I cannot handle it. And so there was a tremendous impact. It just felt like an implosion. It was like an atomic bomb, honestly. It just felt like it was very difficult. And yet, somehow, my soul had put me there. God had put me there. According to multiple people, I was meant to be there with this person just before they passed away. And this was a soul contract that we had decided to do through numerous lifetimes of coming together and having different dynamics of different kinds of relationships. That this was something that we were meant to experience together in this lifetime. And I truly believe that because of how everything in my life had happened up until that point, to almost be like this sort of mirrored experience, even though on the surface things were very different. There was this, real merger that took place, that when the death occurred, it impacted me on nearly every level. But it also, again, gave me tremendous understanding and appreciation for how precious life is. Please never take your life for granted. Please, if you're thinking about harming yourself, please reach out to somebody. Please reach out to somebody. Your life means more to you and to everyone else in the world than you can ever imagine. Life is so precious. It is so short. And again, this is an incredibly special, beautiful time to be alive. And it will get better. You may have to take steps to start to see change and transformation in your own personal life. But it can happen, and it will happen if you show up and you make the choice to live and to just be here. It can be so beautiful.